Hello everybody and welcome back to artofdino.com and saveearth.us. It is time to explore what I consider to be one of the most magical places on Earth and the most mysterious. I do not understand anything about what the true history and ancient everything is regarding Burma. And this place is absolutely amazing. Myanmar, all this whole thing. There's one region by these three temples, and this is the Ananda temple, and there's three other temples within like about a quarter or a half a mile of each other, and they are insane. And then surrounding all of this whole area, every single bit of it for miles and miles and miles, are these structures that are absolutely ridiculous, and they are all at one point were covered in gold and were so much more and must have had some purpose that we can't even fathom now. So I've been trying to dig and seeing what I could find, and I came up with a bunch of different articles that just overall lend to the magic of this place and show that there was something happening here at one point in time that the tales that have lingered on just kind of show that there's something very interesting about this whole area, something immensely ancient, something again tremendously unknown and so vastly radically different than our modern mindset and mentality and reality that again I think we can't even fathom it. And to me, again, this reminds me of just more architecture that came from another dimension or another reality or beyond the poles or something, because the architecture of all of these areas is just to say that there's just people buried in them and they're just tombs, they're just simple tombs, is not doing any justice to them, because they are magnificent structures, and the ones that are still perfected are covered in metals and precious metals and jewels and artwork and color and power. And so when these things no one would deny or would build a building like this if it didn't have a purpose. It's just way too decorative. It's unbelievably elaborate, and then covered in metal and gold. It's more than just a show of power and royalty and whatever. It had to have been something else, just because of the sheer magnitude of these things and the amount that are everywhere. And again, you can't help but think that they look like tech when you look at them. So I'm going to read a few different things from just a bunch of different articles that I found throughout the 1900s and maybe some 1800s ones that just have some interesting things that point, again, towards the magic of this place. And I could theorize for eons about what is going on here and what happened here and what this place looked like in its prime, but I can't even fathom it. It looks so undergrown now. The vegetation is all kind of dying. I guarantee when this place was in its prime, it was lush, beyond compare. And these buildings must have just like that, boom. That's what I picture every one of these brick buildings that you see looking like at one point, until whoever came and destroyed it at whatever period in time. They kind of blame the Tartars at one point, Kublai Khan, and the Chinese at one point, and then the English inevitably came over, and there's some stories relating to that, what they raided. And so this place just, boom, has been attacked. And again, whenever a place like this has been decimated, like Tibet, all these other sacred places that have just gotten decimated by our modern, in the last 200 years kind of people, you can suspect that there's something very important going on here. And I still wonder what is underneath this place. If our country and whatnot was mud flooded, what is this? Or these things could go so deep, they could connect to the underground structure. They could almost lend to my theory that this entire world was architected out and structured out and sculpted out. And that if you were to keep digging under here and remove all the excess dirt, excess land in between these pagodas all over the place, maybe you'd find a massive superstructure that's just absolutely incredible. An underground city, an underground world. And this is just the tops that poke out. Who knows? It could be an ancient power plant, a power grid, an ancient something harp-ish, but not obviously as sinister. But again, it just blows my mind seeing these places. So I included a lot of the longitudes and latitudes so you can check it out on Google Earth, and then I showed pictures like that where you can see the arrows and you can just see how frequent these things are. I've got like 100 pictures, and I could have kept going because it's everywhere you look. The landscape is absolutely dotted with these things. So here we go. Let me read a few different paragraphs that I found to be interesting here. The first article I found was called Pagan. It's called Pagan. That's the name of Burma's sacred city, which also, again, makes me think, oh, they always hate pagans, and they always kind of make fun of pagans in the old Jesuit and all this stuff religion. So did they name this place pagan, or did they come up with that word pagan as a derogatory term as a result of this city, which they destroyed and wanted to get rid of, kind of like Germans and germs, all these different things that they kind of add into our language in order to make us not like, subconsciously think a certain way. So one of the first paragraph of this said, Pagan, Burma's sacred city, is solemnity and mystery. About it is enchantment. Here, 90 miles southwest of Mandalay, the traveler finds himself in the midst of a veritable forest of temples and pagodas, large and small, nearly perfect or almost unrecognizable because of decay. Before their vast bulks, the traveler becomes painfully conscious of his littleness and insignificance. His mere presence seems an impertinence. The crumbling walls, the fallen pinnacles, and the desolation are eloquent of the vanity of fame, the hollowness of glory, and the futility of human effort. So again, they acknowledge that they're getting a feeling from it, like a very amazing presence-y, sacred feeling from it, but then they're just like, oh, these people were too vain. This is all of these are just vanity structures, like a hollowness of glory and the futility of human effort, like, oh, that's useless, all this was useless. Just because they're useless now doesn't mean they were useless back in the day. So it says again, of the 5,000 or more temples that are still to be seen, the Ananda, the Thatbinyu, and the Gauda Paulan, standing all three within a circle of a quarter of a mile radius, are surpassingly beautiful and majestic. The Ananda rises like a structure of foam. On its summit, like the flame upon some altar, a splendor, golden spire gathers the radiance of the sun and flings it forth again to every quarter. It is the first of all the temples to command the traveler's attention, and it is the last upon which he gazes as the swift steamer bears him away. Then it says, the Thatbinyu has suffered more from time and neglect than has the Ananda. Its walls are blackened, and much of the detail of its ornamentation has fallen away. It is hardly beautiful, it is majestic. About it is a suggestion of enormous solidity and a noble loftiness of conception. So it keeps going. This part was pretty cool. I found a lovely view from Circuit House. This paragraph says, the greatness of Pagan, and with it reliable Burmese history, dates from the accession of Anawrahta about AD 1017. This truly remarkable monarch won by the sword a splendid empire and established a dynasty that continued in power for more than 200 years. At the beginning of his reign, he devoted himself to the moral and religious uplift of his people. A corrupt and degrading Naga worship, or obedience to devils in the form of serpents, had come through Assam from northern India. So again, this 1107 AD, and this guy won this area, the splendid empire, by the sword and established a dynasty. So again, it wasn't in its prime when he got it. He wasn't the builder of it. It happened before that. And who knows, again, it seems like it's all totally shrouded in mystery, or the controllers have kept it in mystery, and they know somewhere but aren't telling us the truth, which also could be the main thing behind it. So let's see here. There's a little bit more. There's a lot of Buddhist sacred books and precious relics. One guy says, with characteristic energy, Anawrahta assembled an army and a fleet and moved against Thetan. He was completely successful, and as the spoils of victory, he carried back to Pagan not only the books and the priceless relics, but the king and queen of the fallen city, together with principal nobles, rich treasure, 32 white elephants, and a host of 30,000 artificers and scholars. So just so much happened in the past that we can't even fathom. This just kept going. The history is just so deep and so vast, and what survived is just so minimal. It's kind of saddening, but there's so many interesting stories. You can take a look at those articles and see more. There's one paragraph that says, conquered by the Chinese, which offers a little more history. It says, for more than 2 centuries, the successors of Anawrahta more or less worthily maintained the dignity and prestige of Pagan. But in the north was developing a power that was soon to engulf not Pagan only, but almost the entire continent of Asia, Tartaria. Kublai Khan in 1254 conquered what is now Yunnan, and the Chinese were thus brought into contact with Burma. To the resulting conflict, there could be but one issue. In 1286, Pagan fell before invaders from the north, possible Tartarians, never again to attain historical significance. Of the great battle between the two armies on the plain of Vokiam, Marco Polo gives a graphic and spirited account. Though under the circumstances the fall of Pagan was inevitable, the last king of that unfortunate capital stands in pitiful contrast to the great Anawrahta, known to history as Teo Kapayan, the king who ran away from the Chinese. He was utterly unworthy of his noble office and just peaced out and was gone. So a couple other articles I wanted to include. There's one from 1889, says Shwedagon Pagoda. Above all surrounding objects, as one approaches Rangoon, is the golden spire of Shwedagon Pagoda, crowned with its glittering filigree work. Since the rebuilding in 1768, the pagoda has been 225 feet in height. So that means, that guy took it in 1000. It got taken over in 1200 by the Tartars possibly, and then it started getting rebuilt in the early 1700s, mid-1700s. So I wonder who took over then. Is it the Chinese or something different? Surrounding it upon the same platform are smaller pagodas, temples, gilded ornaments, and trees bearing every manner of tinsel and paper, fruit, and flower, huge griffins resembling neither man or beast, that's interesting, sacred bells and idols and banners in mosaic work of colored glass. And before each shrine the various offerings, and wrapped about the idols gold-bordered yellow cloth, the gift of a seeker after merit, while even the base of the great pagoda itself is draped with the same material. Shwedagon is the most celebrated shrine both in Burma and Siam, and peculiarly sacred, as containing in the innermost recesses of its solid masonry 8 hairs from the head of Gautama, Buddha. Another article from 1910 talks about the 8 holy hairs of the prophet, and says the monument stands over certain relics of Buddha, including 8 hairs which the prophet pulled from his head and gave to 2 Burmese brothers who planted them here. That was many years ago, and since then the followers of Buddha have come here to worship. The first pagoda was erected on the site 588 years before Christ was born, and the present structure was already in place 100 years before Boston was founded. Today, the Buddhists consider it an almost sure passport to heaven to erect a small pagoda about the base of the great Shwedagon, and now there are hundreds of little temples, most exquisitely carved and often plated with gold, running clear around the great monument. These are on the average, I should say, something like 30 feet high, ending in spires plated with gold. They are much like chapels, and inside each of them is a sitting statue of Buddha, often of more than life size. Some of these statues are gold-plated, others are of silver, and not a few of alabaster or marble. They hug the base of the mighty pagoda. Just what a crazy place. So magical. And again, they have these things. There was the hair. There's also the Buddha's teeth. There was one tooth believed to be there, and they had it multiplied at one point, which is also very interesting. And then there's this other book about an old book that was found here. It says sacred Burmese work of centuries, again, was soldiers' loot. So after the British kind of went in there at one point in the 1800s, one guy came out. He took a small Burmese book, not small, it was actually 5 inches thick, and it was like covered in amazingly hand carved, and so he inevitably brought it to a place where a guy was going to assess its value. And so it says, this paragraph says, the first intimation that Mr. Oxley had as to its real value was given him by a Burmese lecturer to whom he showed it a few months ago. The man, on seeing it, bluntly told the owner that he never came by any such book as that honestly, that it could not be held as private property in Burma, and that it was kept sacred and never handled except by the highest orders of the priesthood. He stated that it had taken one man a lifetime to carve the curious characters, and that the book was at least 6,000 years old. He offered Mr. Huxley $200, but the guy was like, nope. Very smart. But again, 6,000 years old, a sacred book, sacred text. In the pages it says, the leaves are sections of palm leaf, paper being unknown until centuries after this particular book was made. And the characters are delicately cut into the leaves so that there is no such thing as fading. So again, a book from 6,000 years ago that hasn't faded. These people were geniuses in the past, and they try to convince us so much that they are dumb, and you just never believe it. They were so smart. There's another one which says January 1899. It's called The God of Murderers. This was in a lot of articles at the time. And this one says, in a certain mountain village called Laituk in the northwest frontier of Burma is a sacred pool in which is said to live a nat, i.e. a demon, called Sherpanlai, who is the guardian spirit of murderers. When a murder is committed anywhere in these hills, the water of this pool is reported to turn blood red. Now when this happens, it is a warning sign to the villagers, who are the wardens of the pool, to be on their guard lest the murderer, whoever he may be, and from whatever village he may come, unobserved succeed in reaching the pool. For the Chin law or custom is that if a murderer manages to elude the avengers of blood, who are usually some near blood relations of the victim, in the vigilance of the guardians of the pool, and succeeds in gaining it, and washes his hands in its blood-red water, which, as soon as this occurs, resumes its usual appearance, testifying that the god of murder is appeased, he is absolved from his blood guiltiness and is thereafter a free man, and no one may henceforth molest him. On the other hand, if he were overtaken by his pursuers, or were he prevented by the village guardians from reaching the well, he would speedily pay the penalty of his crimes with his life. So wow, just a magical thing, a magical world that comes to life where reality and everything was so much different, and things were connected in such a spiritual way that it's again like I really feel, especially nowadays with the fake auroras and all the scientific experiments they're doing to change the energy of the world, and all of the like DARPA experiments they have about tapping